Alright everyone, I am here at home and it's taken longer to get the van fixed than I thought. I brought it in on Monday and it's Friday now. It's okay because I could use a little time to reset, and I've been running sound in the theater all week and I'm doing that through the weekend. But it's Friday here and they just called and let me know the van is ready to pick up, so I'm going to go get on my bicycle and I'm going to ride out to the dealership and get the van. And then over the weekend and the first few days of next week, I am going to get that AC installed as quick as I can so I can get back on the road and start making money, because this put me a little bit behind, and so I have a little bit of money to make up now, which is okay because I'm prepared for that. But anyone who's getting into this business, just know that occasionally you might have maintenance issues that take you down for a week. And so here we are, it's Friday, and I will be showing you the install of the AC unit pretty soon here. Okay, so I just rode my bike out to the dealership and picked up the van. And by the time I got there and picked it up, it was getting a little late in the day, so I went ahead and got a little steak and shake for lunch. And now I came back home, took a quick shower, and I'm off to the theater. It's about time to go. So I will get into a little more detail on what we had done with the van, and then we're going to get into that AC project. Hello everyone, it is Monday here. As you saw in that last video, I had an issue with the van and I had to make it back to Muncie. So I just got the van back from the dealership the other day on Friday, and yeah, it was a little more expensive than I wanted it to be. So what I had done is I had standard maintenance, which included like an oil change and things like that. But I also had a problem with what it was the pinion bearing. They called it a pinion bearing, and that was not cheap. They charged me, labor for installing it and everything, plus the part. So my total came to, let's see if we can find it here. Yep, $2,033. So yeah, it was like I said, a little more expensive than I wanted it to be. But now that that pain is over with and done with, I can move on to the project at hand, because I really need to get off and get to work so I can pay for this. So I've got a bunch of gear to install, so I'm in here, I'm ready to start pulling wires, and I'll show you what I've got going on. So I've got all the tools I think I may want here. I've got a long fish tape, the fish wand for fishing wires, knife, screwdriver, pliers, wire strippers, crimpers. I also got this big crimper for the bigger stuff. I've got small crimps, big crimps, heat shrink. This is 16 gauge wire because I'm going to add some lights. And then this is, what is this here? 10 gauge wire for any of the bigger stuff like the AC if I need extra wire. And speaking of AC, here it is. This is the 12 volt AC unit. These are the lights back here that I'm going to add, and they pop right into the cutouts. They're designed for these cutouts, so I'm going to just add them back here, and that's just going to give me some extra lights to take pictures and film and whatnot. I am going to put them on this dimmer here and then run them through this fuse block, and then I'll have room to grow in the future on the fuse block. I am using a battery isolator for my house battery versus my start battery, so I won't risk the running my start battery down in the middle of the night. Some cable management, some screws for later, and this is a battery shunt. That's so that the AC unit can't pull the house battery totally flat, basically. I got some tapes, and I'm really excited about this. It's a little silly, but I got this for hanging the hard hat in front, and I love that it's yellow like the van and the hard hat. So that's a little side note there. So this is the wiring project. The AC has its own wires. So yeah, I'm gonna get to pulling wire. I'm gonna remove this bed just to make it easier, and this time I think I'm just gonna pull the hinge screws and pull this front piece off just to get it out of my way so I can get in here and wire.
This bed is working pretty well, but I am thinking of a redesign. That is for a future episode.
This coil wire came all coiled up, so I'm gonna straighten it out, and then I'm going to pull it through this back rib for the lights, and I'm going to cut into this wire chase here and run it all the way forward, and it's going to run to the dimmer, and then the dimmer is going to run to the fuse box. I think I can get these first couple runs without any sort of tools. The wire should just kind of run on through. This is going to be the daisy chain these two lights together. Wire cutters, probably good there. Next I'm going to run from here to power up these lights.
And this was not as simple as I thought it would be.
I'm going to investigate this area a little bit here. Okay, I'm removing these channel runs, and I noticed two ways to take them off. I think the easy way is just to slide them. But if you can find out where the hooks are, you can also press in, down, and then out, and it'll unclip. But it's pretty tough to get them to unclip, so I'm going to stick with the easy way and just slide it off like so. And then I'll be able to clip them back on when I'm done. That gets those out of the way so I can run the wires in those races. Alright, back to running wire. I'm going to see if I can't just fish this through here again. Get it nice and straight.
Second time's the charm.
Needs to come out anyways, we're replacing it.
This hook was just what I had at the time.
Last time I used my crooked needle nose pliers. I'm going to have to use them again. Part of the reason I'm replacing it.
I found some truck bed anchors I think are going to work perfect. I found them at Harbor Freight.
Ta-da! Where were we? There we go. I'm going to pull enough through here to go all the way. And then I'll take it one step at a time.
I tucked this through a little spot where the rib meets the wall there, and later I went back and strain relieved it with some double-sided Velcro.
Alright, that's all we got. Gonna clip it right in here. Okay, I was able to run the wire kind of right here behind this foam here, and then I'm gonna run it straight up and across over here, and this is where I'm gonna put my dimmer switch right here. It'll be out of the way, and then I'm gonna run the wire from the dimmer switch back across the top, down, and I'll put my fuse panel in here somewhere. Probably on the other side of this wall. Okay, the wires for this AC are connected to the AC already. So apparently before I run them, I am going to need to cut a hole on the ceiling first. Alright, to cut this hole, first I'm going to start by, I've got my marks for my size. I'm going 14 1/4 because that's kind of the standard, and that is within all of the parameters for the AC I'm putting in. I do like round corners, and so I'm going to use this stepper bit to get started. So I'm taking my mark, which actually in this van lines up perfectly between these two rails, is 14 1/4. So that's nice because the seal will be able to sit flat. And I am measuring in 3/4 of an inch so that I can get basically a 1.5 inch hole. And this does two things for me. One, it gives me nice round corners, and two, it gives me enough room to get a good blade in, because I'm going to drill from the bottom and then I'm going to cut from the top, probably with a Sawzall, I'm thinking. If the Sawzall blade's too big, then I'll switch over to the reciprocal saw, but I think the Sawzall is going to be the magic this time. So to get these more accurate, I'm going to use a punch and a hammer, and I'm going to punch divots so that this will center up in the divot, and then I'll drill big holes in the roof. Here we go.
Does anybody else love round corners as much as I do? So this punch worked really well to center this drill bit and help keep the drill size or the distance from the edge very consistent for me.
Well, it's too late to turn back now.
As you can see, I drilled the rest of the way from the roof because it was a little easier to keep everything in line.
All right, I got the metal blade on the Sawzall. Wish me luck.
Last time I cut open a roof like this, I used a skill saw or a receptacle saw, and this worked so much better. Cut just like butter, but I can't say the camera liked it.
All right, so I cleaned up all the metal shavings, and there we are. I also took a file and just cleaned up around the edges a little bit. So now I'm going to take the AC unit itself and I'm going to get it up on the roof and get it, put the seal on and then get it in place.
Here we go for try number 1, and yeah, that's not going to cut it.
All right, tip number 2.
So tip number 2 worked out for me. I ended up running straps around it and just lifting it up with the rope.
Okay, we're going to start by applying this weather stripping here, and to do so I'm going to clean the surface first with this rubbing alcohol and then put the seal down, and then I can place the AC on top of the seal, and that should be basically it for on the top end. And then we'll be going inside. So once I get this all super cleaned up, then I will check back in with you and show you putting the seal in time. Okay, I'm going to run one piece across the leading edge. I'm going to run it a little extra long because this is the leading edge, so when I'm driving this direction all the rain's going to be coming from. So I feel like that needs the best seal. Just want to run it a little past, or right up, how about right up to these, right up to the well. Scissors work great for cutting it. Make sure I get it down in that valley. I think there's enough flex in the metal when I put my frame under it. It's going to pretty much pull this flat. Now I'm going to run pieces down the sides, like so. I think I'm going to do the back first, because, nope. I'm going to do the sides longer than the back, because again, the direction of my flow is always going to be this way. So I'm going to run these a little long. What does half of this look like? Yep, just going to cut this in half. And I'm going to put it right about there. Nice and tight against that one. Lay it right in there. I'll probably have to come back later and touch up just a little bit of caulk just to make sure these seams seam up nice. And then I've got some extras, so if I need to put little pieces to support the unit elsewhere, I've got a little extra of this size to do that with. Otherwise, we'll save it in case we need it in the future. Our back piece. I'm going to take just little tiny pieces and fill them in those holes. Putting these in just to kind of help seal up this spot way down in there. Time to place the unit. Now it did come with this thick stuff. I'm using the thin stuff because I want as low profile as possible, but I'm going to save this stuff in case I need to redo this. Then I'll just redo it with the thick stuff if I need to redo it. So, not using that right now. This is going to be a challenge. Got to the best angle I can for this process. I'm trying to keep my weight on the ribs of the roof here so I don't dent the top. And I've got to pull this out. Oh yeah, and it is heavy. So, time to remove this from the box. Yeah.
I think someday someone is going to invent a better way to package things, because does anyone else have this struggle, or is it just me? Now that that's over with, it's always good to look a thing over before you go and put it in place.
I think I can put it in place and then take the lid off and reroute this wire. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in place now.
For this install, I need the wires to come out inside the van.
Okay, I'm just going to take these Phillips screws out, take the top off, see what it takes to route the wire through the inside instead of the outside. That's not exactly as advertised. The advertisement, this wire goes through. I've got it open. I'm going to put a few of these tabs in for support.
And I'm using that same strip of sealant. I'm just putting a few little pieces under the back because the back overhangs the hole that is cut in the ceiling, and that way it supports the weight of the back of the unit off of the roof.
It's not as advertised because the advertisement said these wires came through to the cab. They do not come through to the cab.
So first I have to reroute the wires inside the unit itself so that they're situated in a way that'll come through this piece of foam.
Yeah, I'm removing this fuse block so that I can't fit it through. I'll put it back on down below.
Fortunately, this fuse is bolted on, and so it comes off pretty easily, and then the crimp actually can fit through a much smaller hole. Now, once I get the wires routed around to this foam shroud, I'm actually going to take out the screws and lift the foam shroud up. And then once I got it lifted up, I did have to break out a little piece of the foam just so that the wires could fit through and the foam would seal back down in place once I was done.
So I took the two main wires and I ran them right through the styrofoam right there with the rest of the wires and dropped them down in the cab. Now I can put this lid back on and wire it all from inside. And with that, I think we're done up here. So time to go back downstairs and continue wiring. Here we are from inside. And there's our cables coming out. And we're going to run over to that bar and across and over and down and then behind that wall. But I'm having them on the front for now. Now I can move on to starting to insulate the ceiling. Well, the camera battery died on us last night, but I kept working a little bit. So here is the AC unit basically installed. Next step I'm going to do, I'm going to insulate. So this is installed for now. I did build, as you can see, a little wood frame around it that it is bracketed to, and the metal is sandwiched between the wood frame and the AC unit, so it is nice and tight. And then what that does for me is that creates a straight line for the seal on top, so I feel like it's sealed pretty well. It did rain pretty good last night. We got a nice good rain. It's all sunny now, fortunately, but that gave us a good chance to sort of test for any leaks, and I don't see any signs of leaks, so I think that our seal is good and that this up on the roof AC unit is mounted sufficiently. So next step, I am going to insulate, but then I'm going to come back, and after the paneling's on, then I will show you putting the faceplate on and finishing this AC up. I also have to wire it to the battery. The wires run across the ceiling here and over and down in front of this metal wall where the shunt's going to go and things, and so I'll show you all that as well. Alright, I'm off to work. And now it's time to insulate, so I am going to start with a layer of this Reflectix. I'm just getting whatever I could find at my local hardware store and doing this because I'm just getting her done. And this stuff looks interesting. It is a foil insulation with bubbles, and the problem with the other insulation that I'm putting in here, so I'm putting in 2 layers of insulation, And the other layer is a foam insulation. It's a 2-inch foam board insulation. And I really want that layer because it's going to give me R10, which is pretty great for these rigs. The problem is I can't put it directly against the metal. I can't find the stats or specs on it. Maybe I will, and I'll put them here if I do. But I'm pretty sure that stuff would melt if I put it directly against the metal, particularly on the ceiling here. So I am going to use this as a heat barrier between the ceiling and that insulation. And this will give me, there's different R values for different use case scenarios, but I'm figuring it'll give me about an R3 in the way that I'm using it. And so I'm going to tape this to the ceiling, and then that's going to cover all of the ribs and everything. Just going to cover everything except obviously the lights and the AC. But I'm going to wrap around everything on the ceiling with that, and then I'm going to cut foam pieces to fit between the ribs, and I'm going to put those up there, and then I'm going to put paneling over the whole thing. With those lights I installed, oh, I'm looking forward to using those. These lights are running around, and they're running to the dimmer switch here, which is going to be awesome. We're going to start by using our variety of double-sided tape and running strips in strategic locations. I'm going to start with a strip right behind or on either side of this beam. Alright, I'm all taped up. I've got strategic tape locations taped to try and keep everything tight. And it's really just to hold it up until I get the paneling on. So, little pieces of tape everywhere. I'm going to pull the paper off the tape as I go. And now I'm going to go ahead and install this foil insulation. I'm going to put my first run right here. It's going to go all the way to the wall and right to the AC. So I'm going to start by removing paper from this area, and I'm going to start working it right here. And then I'll stick it up, and I'll keep removing paper as I go. All right. I'll say, here goes nothing. I have to come back and cut around this, I think. I think that's going to work nicely. So I've got a thing to cut around over here. Let's see if I can get to a little better angle. I've got a wire going through the ceiling right there. You can see over my arm. I got to cut around that. I've got sticky here so that I can reseat it. I'm just going to find my line, which is this line. I'm going to cut in, I think. That's the point I need to cut to right there. From here. Now this flap should be able to go around that. And I got a light to cut around too. I'm going to use a knife for that, I think. This cable's being a little tricky workaround. We're going to worry about the front of the van later. So I'm going to continue this process along the whole van. Alright, I've done one side. Now I get to go do the other side. And I have a feeling I'm going to run out. I think I'll have enough to do one there and maybe in front of the air conditioner, and then I'm going to have to go get more. Oh joy.
So the second side went smoother than the first side, as you would kind of expect a project like this. But this process worked pretty well to just hold this up in place long enough to get the next layers on.
Alright, so this is coming along good, I think. My little lights cut out and everything. But I ran out right there. Strip right down there. So I had to go to the store. I bought an 18-inch roll this time because that's, or a 16-inch, I think it's 18. That's about what that is, so that'll fit perfect. And I got a little extra tape because, you know, we keep going through this stuff. And I got this double-sided duct tape to try for the next layer of insulation, which hopefully we'll get to very soon here. First, I'm just gonna slap this piece in real quick. Okay, so now that all that's on the ceiling, now I can use some of these aluminum foil tapes that I've got, and I'm gonna tape up all the seams. This way, I'll have a nice, I don't know, moisture seam.
Some tape I had laying around in the basement.
I'm going to do that to all of the seams. I'm really liking the result that tape gave me. It's nice and sealed up. They're starting to look good. Now I'm going to cut the foam to go in between these ceiling rails here and fit all that in, and then put plywood over top. So I think I may cut the first piece of plywood first, and then cut the foam, stick the foam up, put the plywood up, because I don't want the foam to be relying on the tape very long, just long enough for me to get the plywood up. That's what ultimately is going to hold the foam up in the ceiling. So yeah, looking good with that tape, I think. Alright, I'm going to cut the paneling next because I don't really want the styrofoam in the way while I'm cutting this paneling. So I have it here upside down. The finished side is this side, so that I can put marks all over it according to my plan, which is right here. There it is. And that is based off of me measuring the ceiling, so hopefully everything works out great. I gotta cut holes for the lights, cut holes for the AC, a hole for the AC, and drill some holes for fasteners. So I'm going to mark this out and then get to cutting. For starters, I needed it to be 93 inches to hit the, I don't know, rafter, what do you call that? To hit it right, it has to be 93 inches. So first I'm going to cut it to 93 inches.
It took some measuring out, but if you start in the back of the van, it just doesn't land very well based on an 8-foot sheet. So I recommend starting in the front.
I think I'm going to use the skill saw for this.
Skill saw was definitely the right choice to get a nice straight cut here.
Since that's going to be the rough cut, I kind of want that to the front. So I'm going to measure as if that's the front now, and measure back and place some things.
And this required measuring lots and lots and lots of points, and measuring the points from different directions to make sure that it's square and lined up properly to what's actually on the ceiling. So hopefully everything lines up when we're done. Alright,
so I got that drop cut done, rounded out the corners as best I could, got these, drilled the holes. Now I'm going to turn the thing around and mark out the other side. I've got 2 lights and then just mount holes on the other side. There it is, all marked out. Got a drill, cut out these 2 lights, and drill a little up there, and this piece is ready to go. Moving on to the styrofoam board. Got my list of cuts here.
So eventually, with the tools I have, I figured out that the chalk line doesn't work very well on this. The Sharpie definitely works better with a straight line. And I also figured out that I should start the cut with a mat knife because it's way more controllable. I can get the angle I want, and then finish it with this long clip-off blade knife.
Give it a little test hit. Well, I think I gotta call it for the day. I've gotten all of the styrofoam pieces cut for this first section, and I have the paneling cut. So tomorrow I'm gonna tape up the styrofoam into the voids and then cover it with the plywood and then move on. Get this whole thing done. Alright, we got all the foam cut and the paneling. Time to put a foam into the voids and then put this paneling on the ceiling. I'm going to start by putting up some strips of this double-sided duct tape, and my hope is that that will hold these foam panels up long enough for me to get the plywood screwed up, and then that should hold everything together. Just found this double-sided duct tape. I've never used it before, so we'll just have to see how this goes. See if I can tear it. Oh, it tears. Now, I kind of don't want to put it right over the tape because in my head, that's too direct of the thermal transfer. I'm actually going to put the tape in the middle. And again, it just needs to hold it up here long enough for me to get the plywood on. See how hard it is to get the cover off this. This might be a good use of a knife. To get the cover off, we might think about that next time we use this. There goes one. Well, there goes one of them. So I think I'm going to be a little more cautious about tearing it, or figure out how to tear it so that this comes off easier. So as I go, I am kind of cutting these corners out to custom fit it into the van any way I have to. And it's coming together. I cut a channel for this wire up here. Got those pieces in. So moving on to the big piece next. First, I like to test fit. Just found with this tape that if you tear it kind of sloppy, it makes it a little easier to peel. So I'm going to peel these, stick this one up, hope it stays. Alright, we're going to try this out. It's a big piece to try and hang. I'll just have to do it while I sheet. Maybe this front piece will hang. Well, that tape won't hold the big piece up, so I'm going to do this in sections. I'm going to get, it won't hold this piece up either. I'm going to get this front attached to the here, and then I'll slide that last piece in and attach it all the way back. Let's see if that plan works.
Welcome to the circus. So here I found out rather quickly that the screws that I got were not long enough to reach through to the metal.
Okay, I got some longer screws, and I'm going to start by screwing around the AC. Oh boy. So I'm going to take off this bracket just long enough to get paneling on, and then the bracket can go over the paneling.
So that was attempt number 2, and I really think I probably should have noticed that those brackets were in the way. But now that we're on to attempt number 3, everything seems to be working out around this wood frame of the AC. But those metal screws just weren't quite long enough, and it was really hard to find a good place to seat them into the metal.
I think I'm going to have to do furring strips. Okay, so now I've added these furring strips. Give me something to screw to. Let's try this again.
Oh, and what are we on? Attempt number 4. Hopefully it works this time. And so I think the furring strips probably would have been a great idea from the start. But, you know, I'm learning as I go here. And you can learn as you go too, and hopefully you learn something from me, so when you try this project, you'll save some time.
Okay, I feel like the project is finally coming along. I've got the first piece on. So you can see here I did use furring strips and making them custom. 3 furring strips for each one, and then I'm screwing to the furring strips, and that seems to be working out pretty well. I went all the way around the AC, obviously, and I've got a few magnets holding it up in the front. Eventually I'll work a piece of trim up there or something as a solution to hold that part up. Still have to do the sides and the back. I think I'm going to do the back here, and then I'm going to move on to electrical, and then I'll fill in the sides later because they're less important for right now, and I'm trying to get back on the road. So I am cutting furring strips. Here's my next set that are going to go on this rib here, and I'm just cutting these out of scrap 2x4 that I have around. I rip cut a bunch of stuff for those windows to install, so mostly I've been using up that scrap, and I used it almost all up doing this, but I'm just rip cutting it to whatever thickness I need. And then I'm using the 1.5" self tappers to go through the wood into the metal, and then I can use whatever wood screw I want to actually screw the paneling on. So I'm going to attach these and start designing and cutting and doing all that good stuff. I've got to cut the plywood or paneling, and then I've got to cut the insulation.
And it's always a good idea to measure twice, because sometimes you put the line a little crooked and you have to go back and re-snap the line, but chalk's great for that because it wipes right off And now we're off to the races. Going to mark out these lights, and then I'm pre-drilling holes for the fasteners to go through just to be a little cleaner, and then using this reciprocal saw to cut out the light bins, and then we're off to the installation, and there I am with the Sharpie and the straight edge and the matte knife and then the clip-off blade knife. And then I'll make several passes with the clip-off blade knife because it doesn't really want to cut through the whole thing at once. And I managed to not break any blades doing this. I know there's easier ways to do this, or there's different ways to do this at least, but this is what the tools I had, and it seemed to work for me.
So as I do this, I am kind of tapering the corners, see, for where these supports go out. And now I can test fit it. It's right in the middle. And it'll get held up just like that. So that piece is good to go. And now I'm going to measure out and cut this piece, and then I can put the paneling on.
Anyone want to bet how many attempts this one takes? So here we go. We're off to the races. And of course,
I haven't put the furring strip on.
So these furring strips are really pretty easy with these self-tappers. I just occasionally miss where the metal is, find a hole, and have to re-try that fastener.
I sure wish this was done and that AC was running already. I am sweating like crazy. But furring strips are on. Yay.
Ready for attempt number 2. But of course the furring strip got a little in the way.
It's not one thing, it's another. Okay, I'll trim down.
Okay, so on this I actually got it on the 3rd try. 3rd turn's the charm on this one. And I think that it's turning out to look pretty good once I actually get it done. I'm using a really thin paneling here, and I think it was a good choice.
No, I just kind of shuffle the foam around until it's nice and settled, and then fill in the screws. And then this piece will finally be up. The first thing I'm going to do is put on this faceplate, and this faceplate has this foam seal right here. Of course, our support bars have to go through the foam seal, so I'm going to cut channels for the support bar to go through. And I think my sealing is a little deeper than what they gave me here, so they gave me some other pieces to block it up, which I'm going to do that too, and then I'll be ready to put it on. And the blocks will go over the support bars. Yeah. Well, we had a pretty good storm last night. It took out this tree that the power company had said they were going to come cut down, but they never got around to it in time, I guess. But it missed the shed, just barely. That's good. But it did take out the internet. So here's the cable line. I hope you can see that there. Yep, the internet is definitely down. We reported it, and hopefully they come fix the internet. And I guess I got to treat it to take care of someday, but I will just have to drive the van out the side yard that way, which I know I can do, so that's fine. Okay, now that I got the middle section of the ceiling done, it's time to move on to wiring up the cab. So I'm going to put a second battery underneath the passenger seat here, connect it up to the main system over here under the driver's seat, run my cables underneath the flooring here. I'm going to add a battery isolator, a shunt, and a little fuse box. And I think I'm going to put those on that back plate of the seat right there. So it'll be pretty easy to access. So I got a little cleanup to do, get prepped for this project, make sure everything is what I think it is. I'm pretty sure that these posts on the side of this seat over here are power. So I think I can tap in right there, and if I can, that'll be excellent. That'll get this done. I've got the AC running right here to the front side of the wall. Power that up, and then I've got the lights over here I'll have to run around. This is the power for that, and I need to run that around to the fuse box. So a little bit of work to do today. I'm 1 day behind now, so I am going to try and bust all this out today and get this van put back together so I can get on the road tomorrow. Here we are in a 2021 Transit. This is the customer access for the power on the side of the driver's seat, and you'll see we've got our voltage. There it is. Got our voltage coming off, positive and negative terminals there. And again, this is driver's seat in a 2021 Ford Transit. Okay, so I'm under the passenger seat. I put a strap from the front of the seat where I could strap on coming out, and a piece of foam fitted in there. And I'm going to set the battery in here, and then I'm going to put this other little piece of foam behind it and strap it in. Okay, I used my scrap piece of paneling to fit a base in here. I thought it'd be nice for the battery to have something nice and level to sit on, and this was just a scrap. So there we go. I'm ready to put the battery in here. That is a heavy battery. Time to see if it fits. Fits. Yay. There it is. The Renogy 12 volt 100 amp hour battery. I don't know. I think I have to take the foam out to fit two of them in there. That is a big battery. Alright, so I'm going to catch ground off one of these seat bolts for this system, and then I'm going to tie together. I'm going to use a big wire for the hot and just tie the grounds together. And so I'm going to run these wires underneath this piece of wood here together. I've got them taped so that hopefully they'll go together. Here we go.
Those thick wires really push through holes nicely.
That's about perfect right there. Okay, I'm making up the ends with crimps, and then I'll heat shrink. Adding red heat shrink to that just so we know it's positive. I'm going to come over here and we're going to cut it. It's going to go to the battery isolator. I've got a voltage sensing battery isolator coming, so that's going to get replaced soon. And from the battery isolator, it'll go straight to the positive terminal of the battery. And then we're using this nice heavy duty cable for that. It's a 2 gauge. And then I'm going to run a 2 gauge from the ground up to, well, to this shunt here. And then another leg to the body ground. And then from the other side of the shunt, we're going to go both to the fuse box ground terminal, and we're going to run up to the AC, which is up here. So to make these up, first we're going to cut. This is a big wire to cut with these little cutters, but it will get through them. These Klein wire cutters are pretty burly. There it goes. Then we're going to strip it. I don't really have any fancy tools, so I'm just using a knife. And if we get out our crimp here, we can see exactly how far back to strip the wire. I'm going to turn you out a little bit. There you go. So I'm going to strip the wire back to right about the G. So I'm just going to cut just the insulation. We don't want to cut the copper with my knife all the way around. And then hopefully we can pull this off just like that. Didn't get quite all the way through it. That's okay. There we go. Now that's off. Make sure our strands are straight. We can put on the heat shrink next. That'd be smart. And again, this is hot, so we're going to want red. I'm going to slide that down. And then we'll put our crimp on. And we'll crimp away.
It took me a few minutes to actually figure out how to use these crimps. They're a little strange, but they work.
Now I'm using this heat gun to shrink wrap all of the wires right where I want them. Takes it a second to warm up. There we go. It's all warmed up now. Once it gets warmed up, it goes pretty fast. Now it's time to wire all this up. I will show you the result when I'm done. Okay, we are all wired up here, except wiring to the batteries. That's what I'll do next. I'll wire to that battery, and this will wire to the van's battery via the customer access port. And so then we have our ground coming from good chassis ground into the shunt. This cable will go to the battery. And then we've got the system. This big cable is going up to the AC. And then I've got a second ground coming in here to the fuse box. And then my hot is going to come off the battery here through this fuse here. And then it goes up to the AC, these, and then over to the fuse box here. I've got lights coming into the fuse box right here. I've got a fuse put in for them. And there's, yep, 2 wires to go onto here. One is just to tie the batteries grounds together, the other tie it to the ground system. And I actually have 3 wires over here. One is coming from the battery isolator, which I'm going to replace actually, but it'll work for a test. Because I'm going to put a voltage sensing battery isolator in here. And then the other little one is going to just the battery plus of the shunt. Yep, and then that's it for the hot side. Nope, there's one more. Oh yeah, no, that's it. So we have the hot going to the system here through this fuse, and then it splits here, and then the other hot is coming from here, and that's the charge wire. Anyways, that's all wired up. I got this wire running over here. We're going to first connect the battery up, and then the run battery. And I got these all buttoned up the wall, and that wires in the AC and the additional lights through this dimmer. So I'm excited to get this going and get it tested. Alright, there we are, blowing out cold air out of the AC in the van. All my wiring is done. I fired it off with just this battery, and it worked great with just that battery. And then I went and tied in the alternator power so that it'll charge while I drive. And here's the lights in the back working. So now I got all that done. I really got to clean up because I'm supposed to work tomorrow. So off to cleaning up, put what I can together while I go. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good jazz.